Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, January 2nd, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program, welcome to 2020, folks. This year's going to be a real crap storm. Meanwhile, Pelosi and McConnell, their impeachment stalemate continues. But there are signs part of McConnell's support is beginning to crumble a little.
My firewall.
Meanwhile, we are 33 days until the Iowa caucus, ladies and gentlemen. Julian Castro is out as of today. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders breaks fundraising records, smashes them. Speaking of smashing, Iraq cracking under Donald Trump's Iran policy. Thousands of U.S. troops are set to deploy to the region. Meanwhile, as Australia burns, a new study shows that it may be all of our futures, and worse. Trump pardons the would-be war criminal who busts out a new line of casual wear. Not the Onion. Cash bail ended for misdemeanors and nonviolent crimes. Evictions down in New York. Another belated thank you to Governor Cynthia Nixon. Federal judge strikes down North Carolina voter ID law as racially motivated. Meanwhile, immigration judges are leaving at double the rate under Trump than in past years. EPA advisors warn of its regulatory rollbacks. These are EPA advisors appointed by Trump who are worried about what we're doing at the EPA. Meanwhile, Bibi Netanyahu wants immunity from Israeli corruption charges. I wonder why. And 11,000 people with weed convictions have now been pardoned on the eve of full legalization in Illinois. All this and more on the first day of the Majority Report in the year 2020, arguably in a new decade. I don't want to get back into that argument. We can wait until January of, or I guess late December of 2020. I was just telling Brendan that I don't think I've ever had less of a sense of what things are going to look like a year from any other point than this in the 15 some odd years now that I've been doing this. I knew that Donald Trump had a 15% chance of winning against Hillary Clinton. I didn't think he would. But I did have a sense of if he won, what it would look like. And as I go through the potential scenarios of what could happen by the end of this year, Donald Trump wins. Bernie Sanders wins. Joe Biden wins. Elizabeth Warren wins. I really think those are probably the only real, possible potentialities. I mean, I guess it's conceivable, Pete Buttigieg. I also think it's conceivable, I don't think he would win, but that Mike Bloomberg runs in a third-party bid and causes one of the other things that we just talked about to happen. But in all of those scenarios, I still can't tell you what the situation's going to be on this date in 2021. If Donald Trump loses, I'm not convinced that he's not right now, a year from today, banking on the Supreme Court's case that is supposed to be heard in 3 days or something. That Bill Barr has been arguing, whatever it is, or that Joe Biden squeaks by in some fashion, or that Bernie Sanders is the president and it's just mayhem because, Mike Bloomberg is already threatening to sue or whatever it is. I really don't have a sense. This is going to be a crazy year, and we will do our best to at least keep you abreast of what's happening and give you a sense of where things are going.
And all of that will begin on the beginning of the second decade of the Majority Report. So that's a good pitch.
That is correct. I forgot about that. We will also be celebrating the 10th anniversary of this program, and it will happen. I can't even remember the date exactly, but we checked it out the other day. And by the other day, I mean like a month ago. I have no idea when things happen anymore. The 10th anniversary of this program will happen on Election Day in 2020. Between now and then, we will be doing, and because on that day, I'm anticipating, it's November 3rd. On that day, I'm anticipating we're going to do like a 12-hour show. I mean, I don't even know if we is really a fair thing to say because I don't know anybody else is going to show up here. But
some of us will have to vote at some point.
Yeah. But I'll be just sitting here babbling. Between now and then, we will be doing live coverage of, I don't know if we'll be able to do every single debate, but the vast majority of debates. We will do live coverage on specific nights during the primary. Like I suspect, I'm not sure about this, that we will be live on the for the Iowa primary, caucus. And I would imagine Super Tuesday is also going to be a big day. And we will be live during that. We will be live for at least 3 of the 4 debates that will take place in the next 2 months. The next debate is January 14th. It's Tuesday in Iowa. The Iowa caucus is February 3rd. Then there's a New Hampshire debate February 7th. I don't know, maybe I'll shoot up there for that one. There's a Las Vegas debate on February 19th. Maybe I'll go to that one. I think the 25th may be tricky because I have a feeling that's during the kids' vacation, in which case, I don't know. I might be able to do it. Just call in. We'll do it that way. We'll figure out something. And then, of course, we're going to, at one point, I think, have an impeachment trial in the Senate. And here's what's happening in terms of impeachment. We'll play the Biden in a bit. So we're anticipating an impeachment trial in the Senate. Nobody's quite clear on when this is going to happen because Pelosi has been holding back the articles of impeachment, has yet to send them to the Senate. We're in one of those areas where no one really knows what this means, right? I mean, Noah Feldman, one of the constitutional lawyers or professors who testified in front of the House for impeachment proceedings, has written that if Pelosi doesn't send them to the Senate, he's not technically impeached yet. That is a requirement. That may be the case. I don't think that's, terribly relevant frankly, because as far as the country is concerned, he's impeached. As far as he's concerned, he's impeached. Nobody anticipates that he's going to be convicted in the Senate. But the question is how much pain is going to be exacted politically, and who's going to suffer that pain? It has been my contention for a while that that pain is going to be felt by a half a dozen, maybe more, Republican senators up for re-election. That this puts them in a very tenuous position because they don't want to be seen as going against Donald Trump because the Republican Party loves Donald Trump. The Republican Party is Donald Trump. But they're also running in states where nearly half the population, maybe sometimes more, maybe sometimes a little less, don't want their senator to be so chummy with Donald Trump. And this vote, if you wanted to argue as a challenger running against one of these senators that senator is in league with Donald Trump, there couldn't be a greater gift than one vote that says, I support maintaining Donald Trump and don't think he's done anything wrong, or I think he did something wrong. Like that one vote sums up, because, we have, not everybody has time to sort of wade through all this stuff. That's one vote that can sum it up. Are you protecting Donald Trump? Or are you allowing him to be subject to justice? How do we know? How can we measure where this is from the perspective of these politicians? Well, we can look at some of the more vulnerable or politicians whose career is and power is wrapped up in being at least at arm's length from Donald Trump on the Republican side. And we can look on the Democratic side and see what are those Democrats doing in places where Donald Trump is rather popular. What do they feel they can get away with? Now, maybe these politicians don't know what's going on whatsoever, but we look at the polls. The polls have basically been static. Donald Trump's approval rating, I think, is like, on average, is more or less at the same, maybe slightly higher at this time of year. But it jumps around. It's jumped around throughout his entire period of his presidency. We can look at where impeachment stands. Maybe its popularity is down a point or two, but it jumps around. So here is, let's start with Lisa Murkowski. I don't think she's worried about a challenge, but her brand is trying to maintain some semblance of being above it all. She's probably the only one. Well, it's her and Susan Collins. Susan Collins really pretends. Murkowski, to a certain extent, remember, she won in a write-in vote. She lost her Republican primary last time around, if I'm not mistaken. And so let's take that temperature on where we stand in terms of impeachment in the Senate as far as the Republicans are concerned.
Demanding the trial process be fair, but there are questions about impartiality. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said there will be total coordination with the Senate and the White House counsel's office.
And in fairness, when I heard that, I was disturbed.
Murkowski says while this isn't a criminal trial, the Senate is still required to do impartial justice under the Constitution.
To me, it means that we have to take that step back from being hand in glove with the defense. And so I heard what Leader McConnell had said. I happen to think that that has further confused the process.
The senator undecided how she'll vote until she's heard the evidence.
For me to prejudge and say there's nothing there, or on the other hand, he should be impeached yesterday, that's wrong. In my view, that's wrong.
As she calls for a process that is fair and full, and her vote could be key in ensuring that happens. She is seen as one of three swing Republicans, and she embraces her image of independence.
If it means that I am viewed as one who looks openly and critically at every issue in front of me rather than acting as a rubber stamp for my party or my president, I'm totally good with that. I am totally good with that.
Now, why is Lisa Murkowski so good with that? It's because she has a deep reservoir of integrity. No, it's because she's a politician and she has a sense of what's going to work in the context of her state. She is not so worried about being primaried. And as you get closer to the date when most of the filing deadlines end, that's early March, you're going to see a little bit more distance put in there relative to how much distance each of these politicians think they have to maintain. Susan Collins is also walking a tightrope. She came out and said, do we have audio of this? Here it is.
As well. Then we moved to what I call the third stage. At that point, we debated whether or not we wanted to hear from witnesses and get additional documents. And there was a roll call vote with Republicans wanting witnesses at that point.
Pause it for 1 second.
And Democrats.
This is she's recounting the Clinton impeachment. Go ahead.
Few exceptions, not wanting witnesses. So we have a reverse of the current situation. And we decided to call just 3 witnesses and to have them deposed rather than testifying live.
Should Mr. Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, and John Bolton be people that should be called to testify, given their firsthand knowledge of this alleged quid pro quo, which the president hates, but that's what it was, on arms for an investigation deal?
I am open to witnesses. I think it's premature to decide who should be called until we see the evidence that is presented and get the answers to the questions that we senators can submit through the Chief Justice to both sides. What I don't understand is why the House, having issued subpoenas to Secretary Pompeo, for example, did not seek to enforce those subpoenas in court.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's not exactly accurate. We know that the House is pursuing subpoenas on 1 or 2 of these individuals that theoretically will set a precedent and force others to do so. But there's Susan Collins also hedging. And lastly, do we have a tear sheet from that? Doug Jones, who is the senator from Alabama, Democrat, who everybody presumes is going to lose because Democrats shouldn't be winning in Alabama based upon what we know of the makeup there. He went out on a limb too. Now, both of those Republicans, tiny limb. These are short stubs, but they're going out on a limb a little bit because they need to. Here's Doug Jones going out on a limb too because he knows that he needs to maintain his Democratic support. And he's calculating that there's room enough for him to do this even with the Republicans in Alabama. And all of this, the point of this is essentially to make the argument of where the politicians think they need to be on impeachment. And it gives you a sense of just where impeachment lands in terms of the import for each party's base. Doug Jones knows that he cannot win in Alabama without the support of every Democrat, enthused Democrat in Alabama. And he knows he has to come out and be supportive of a full-on process in the Senate, which is what the Republicans do not want. Lindsey Graham, despite what he said during the Clinton's impeachment, I want this to be over soon. Mitch McConnell, doesn't matter. We're hand in glove with the president. We're just going to wrap this up as soon as we can. These are guys who are terrified of their base in South Carolina and Kentucky. Lindsey Graham is looking at it both ways. He has a legit Democratic challenger in South Carolina now. And so he knows he needs every Republican to support him. So he's coming out strong against impeachment. Doug Jones knows he needs every Democrat to support him. So he's coming out and saying we need to have a longer process. Even Joe Manchin is saying that. So that's where we are in terms of impeachment. Of course, also, let's check in and see what Donald Trump says about impeachment. Here he is at a New Year's soiree. And at,
so glamorous.
At Mar-a-Lago, Florida. Here it is.
Matter. As far as I'm concerned, I'd be very happy with the trial because we did nothing wrong. We didn't even have a witness and we won 196 to nothing. Okay, we didn't have a witness. That was all the Democrats' witness. Look, Adam Schiff is a corrupt politician. He's corrupt. He got up, he made a speech, said something I never said.
Now, I know what you're saying. What's the 196 to 0? We've done some sleuthing, and 196 to 0, there was 195 Republicans who voted to not impeach Donald Trump. Now, of course, Justin Amash was kicked out of the Republican Party because he wanted to impeach Donald Trump. So he doesn't count. And then there were 3 Democrats who voted against impeachment. 3 on one article, 2 on the other. But he's including Jeff Van Drew as a Republican because he had switched to being a Republican after the fact. So he's taking that as 196. That's what that is. And the not one witness, I don't know what he's talking about. There were multiple witnesses that could be called by the Republicans, except for all those Republicans refused to show up because at Donald Trump's behest. So, but there he is. I am very happy that his New Year's was spent worried about the impeachment. So there it is.
I hope they make 196 to 0 T-shirts on the campaign trail, the way they did the
read the transcript.
I mean, it'd be nice if some Democrats counted Republican votes like that.
Yeah.
What's that? Oh, yeah, we should
don't even count them.
Yeah, we just don't even. Sorry, folks. Republicans they had zero votes. We didn't count the Republican votes.
They are Republicans.
So let's turn to the other sort of obviously big story of 2020. That will be the Democratic primary. There are some videos of Joe Biden going around online right now that have been, that I think have been sort of cut in such a way that are unfair to Joe Biden. One of him about him talking about European culture in relationship to abuse of women. And it's trying to make it seem like, I don't know, that he's being a white supremacist. And I think that's, and that video, I think it's wrong to interpret that video. I mean, I think it's fine to go back and look at, why he was so comfortable with segregationists and against all that stuff throughout the ages. But that video is not it. There's another video of him out there, I think, where he's talking about cuts to Medicare and Social Security. And I think it's also cut in a sort of a slightly misleading way. All I can tell you is that, yes, of course, Joe Biden, his career was built on those notions of austerity. In fact, he was the one who tried to promote that deal under the Obama administration to cut Social Security. That's simply a fact. He was also the one who left the Republicans off the hook during the fiscal cliff. He undercut Harry Reid. Go read Ryan Grimm's book, We Got People, on some of the details of that. But there's this other video out there where Joe Biden says he's open to a Republican vice president. Now, that's a very glib way to characterize this video. In some respects, I would say that when you see it in context, it's worse. Now, this is going to be a long clip, but you'll see where he meanders to. And let me just give you an alternate. Let's just do this for the sake of, because people, some people are going to be like, well, what did you expect him to say? Matt, ask me, would I be open? Now, of course, I'm not running for president. I may primary Chuck Schumer, but I'm not going to run for president. Even if I become senator, I'm not going to run for president. So don't ask me.
You're ruling it out already.
I'm ruling it out. I'm only going to do one term as senator. All right. Ask me, would I choose a Republican?
Sam, would you choose a Republican running mate?
Look, I'm not going to say no to any type of people about who I would pick, but I can tell you the Republican Party stands for fundamentally different ideas than I have. And I can't imagine there's anybody out there who calls himself a Republican now who would be simpatico with my politics. That doesn't mean that I hate them. That doesn't mean that I can't work with them. Doesn't mean that I don't respect them. But frankly, the Republican Party, if I wanted to pick a Republican, I'd be running as a Republican. That's the way you do it. If you want to show your respect for Republican voters because you don't want to shut them off, that's the way you do it. They're going to respect that. You could even take it even further. Well, you know what? I believe in what some would call conservative values. Like we should be helping people. You do that type of like word game. But he doesn't. He doesn't do that. And because I think he is still... Remember, this is a guy who campaigned for a Republican congressman in Michigan. Fred Upton. This is a guy who has been really explicit. Now, either he takes it as... this is a guy who says that without Donald Trump, I'm going to be able to deal with these guys. There's either a legit delusion here or not. But towards the end of this, in fact, the final words he says in this long clip, I think, give you a sense of why he feels he can do business with Republicans.
If you are the nominee, as she suggested over there, we're going to have to pull out all the stops. Our 21-year-old son said the other night, I wonder if Joe Biden would consider choosing a Republican as a running mate.
The answer is I would, but I can't think of one now. No. Look here. No, I'm serious. No, here's what I mean. Let me explain that. There's some really decent Republicans that are out there still. But here's the problem right now of the well-known ones. They've got to step up. Do you know what I mean?
All right, pause it for 1 second. Let me tell you what Rush Limbaugh does and what all the right-wing talkers do that we on the left were never sort of like able to really pull off, which is whenever Republicans disappoint them, whenever they don't do what they want them to do, they say they're afraid. They've been browbeaten. They're cowardly. Sometimes they'll go that far. They're cowardly. They're weak. They never say they're corporatist or they're too socialistic or they're too flim-flamsy or whatever it is. It's always that they are afraid. And that is the exact same frame that Biden's doing. And why do you use that frame? Because you make it about it's not them, it's the context in which they're dealing with. So that they're ultimately redeemable. Now, of course, are these people redeemable as human beings? I don't know. Maybe God will say, like, when you get to the pearly gates, if there's a God, he'll say whatever. I don't know. But politically, how do you square that circle? It's not just that we're at a time of like partisan rancor. We're at a time of ideological real divides. It's real. These divides are real. We have material, real problems in this country. You see reports that we could solve, we could solve our climate crisis, but we could make a huge dent in it for $300 billion if we spent it tomorrow. And you've got, 3 or 4 men in this country who have that much money just in their bank or in their assets. That the top, what is it? I don't know, a couple hundred billionaires in the country, got a $1.5 trillion. I mean, there's some real material differences here, but continue.
I'm not being a wise guy, but there are a lot of people. And by the way, it's presumptuous of me. I'm going to get clobbered by the press. Biden's talking about vice presidential candidates who doesn't have the nomination, which is totally legitimate, okay? But there are an awful lot of people
That's not it.
Who are qualified to be. The only thing I know about is the qualifications for vice president. And by that I mean, no president can, by him or herself, handle the job all themselves any longer. It's too big. And so one of the things that I worked out with, we worked out, Barack and I, is that when he gave me responsibility, he gave me total presidential authority. I could hire people, I could fire people, I could pick anyone from administration to work with me. I had complete control, not a joke. And the reason he was confident in doing that is, first of all, nobody wondered whether or not he couldn't do it. That's because it's a hard thing for a person to give somebody significant responsibility, like doing a Recovery Act, for example. It's $900 billion, and then it pointed out that less than 0.2% fraud or waste occurred, and that person gets a lot of credit, in this case me. Well, it takes a president to be able
Pause
to
it for 1 second. I'm not going to let that slide. First of all, it was closer to $800 billion in the Recovery Act, 2/3 of which were tax cuts. I don't know what kind of fraud and waste you're going to get in the tax cuts. But remember Mr. Train Joe? Has anybody seen all the new high-speed trains that we have that came out of the Recovery Act? Because I haven't. Now, I think it's wrong that he gets that everybody gives him credit for it. That's the first I've heard of it. But if he wants the credit for all those shovel-ready jobs that didn't happen, you can have it. If he wants the credit for the fact that was about $500 billion short from what we needed, that we had a protracted recovery, that we had immiseration in terms of the housing sector, that in fact it was so bad that we elected Donald Trump. And even if you want to say it shouldn't have been that, it was a half a dozen other things. It shouldn't have been that close. The reason why it was that close was because of the failures of what this guy wants credit for. But go ahead.
And that person gets a lot of credit, in this case me. Well, it takes a president to be able to say, have the confidence that that's not going to diminish them in any way. And secondly, it requires you to be simpatico with your vice president. Not just like them, not just trust them, but make sure they're in the same exact wavelength politically.
Now, I want to know what Republican is in the same exact wavelength of Joe Biden. Like, how is that even possible? That's the problem with that statement. It's that Joe Biden does not see himself as fundamentally different from a quality Republican. That's the problem with that statement. Not that he's completely has a tin ear as to what the lay of the land is. That is problematic. Tin ear as to what the politics of that comment is. A tin ear as to the efficacy of the Recovery Act. Now, yes, I think it did stop us from descending into a genuine depression. But there's no economist now who doesn't say look, it was insufficient. And there were plenty at the time who were saying it was insufficient. Paul Krugman was writing on the Times. It wasn't like this was all in the back pages of the Baffler magazine. But in the end, now you could say, well, he was rambling. He had no idea where he was. And so he sort of like looped around because he was trying to, at one point, like he was trying to make it like, well, Obama trusted me so much that he gave me all the work. So he knew I was competent. But the other thing is we were very simpatico in terms of our politics. That's what you need for a vice president. So yes, I would appoint a Republican. I can't name a specific one. But what generic, theoretical, hypothetical Republican exists that Joe Biden feels so close to? That's what should worry you about this moment. Because Joe Biden, in his mind, is a Republican from 1993. And I would remind you that it was Republican politics in 1993 that led to the politics of today. Things like austerity, things like cutting Social Security, things like cutting Medicare, things like rolling back regulations on the EPA, things like the idea that government's too big, that government's too clumsy, that government can't do anything. Things like tax cuts are always the answer. Things like wealth inequality is not that big of a deal. That's the problem with Joe Biden. It's not that he would consider a Republican or even that he would use that rhetoric. It's that he perceives himself as being politically simpatico. Is that what he said? Is that the words he used at the end? With a hypothetical Republican. Well, I want to know who is this hypothetical Republican that we as Democratic voters would be happy with? As our first choice, as our nominee. That's the problem with Joe Biden's comments. That's the real problem with Joe Biden's, I'd pick a Republican VP, or I'd be willing to. That dude scares me. He scares me because I think he would lose to Donald Trump, or certainly has a higher chance of losing. And he scares me because he has a chance of winning, frankly. Now, I would rather him win than lose, obviously. But, at one point, we're going to have to get off this merry-go-round. And it's not going to happen by going back to where we were just before Donald Trump, because that's what led to Donald Trump. And frankly, one of my biggest fears about a Donald Trump presidency would be that we would go right back, if not further back in time in terms of politics, because that's a natural reaction for people. While we're talking about 2020, obviously mentioned up front, Julian Castro left the race today. I have to say that he left the race. I was more of a fan of him after he left the race than when he entered.
Because I don't think any of us were especially big fans of his before he entered the race. Yeah.
Right. Now, to be fair, part of that was because, was it his brother that spoke at the 2012 Democratic convention? I think it was his brother, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was Julian Castro.
It was Julian.
Yeah.
That speech that he gave, I was not happy with. There was a lot of like, pull yourself up with your bootstraps type of quality. Like, if you are lucky enough to have an abuelita like I did, then you're in good shape. Otherwise, you're SOL. And I found that a little bit problematic. But, he was pushing good policies as a candidate. And I would have much rathered him be further along in the race than someone like Amy Klobuchar, let's say, in terms of bringing in new ideas, telling us what we can't do. Here is Andrew Yang, who has opened the door to what we can do. One of those things is give everybody $1,000 a month and give people who are relying on the social safety net the choice. You can either take what benefits you're getting now, which are more often than not insufficient, and get slightly more on a monthly basis Of course, relative to everyone else in society, you will not be making up for those deficits that you are dealing with. But it's a theory. And in theory, I don't have a problem with the government handing out money to people on a regular basis, but it should be on top of any other type of services that we're giving now at the very least. And so here he is, Andrew Yang. Oh, the other thing that he has an interesting take on is Medicare for All. Medicare for All is the name of a bill in the Senate introduced by Bernie Sanders. It is also the name of a bill in the House introduced by Pramila Jayapal. Medicare for All is not literally Medicare for all. It is a derivation of what Medicare is. It's closer in many respects to Medicaid for all. But it is a specific bill that has specific benefits that it's offered. There's a specific plan in passing it, a phase-in plan. There's a lot of specifics behind this. All of the funding is not necessarily there, but no bill is introduced with all of its funding. Everybody has a plan to fund it. It's a very specific thing. That is a problem, apparently, for Andrew Yang, because he wants it to mean something different, because apparently he knows how it lands on people's ears. I'm going to play this after, but I'll also play it this way.
And you, sir, you're a pretender.
Here's Andrew Yang on ABC's This Week trying to pretend. I mean, look, if you don't support it, don't support it. Joe Biden doesn't. Pete Buttigieg doesn't. They're pretty explicit about it. Andrew Yang doesn't want to be as explicit about it. I wonder why.
Okay, I want to turn to your healthcare plan, because you've just released a new healthcare plan, and I'm a little bit confused about where you stand. First, I want to play clips from 2 of your ads where you talk about healthcare.
We need to move towards a Medicare for All system where every American has access to quality and affordable services.
His ideas are a blueprint for a new way forward. A healthcare system with Medicare for all.
But I've looked at your healthcare plan. In fact, I've got it right here. And this plan does not call for Medicare for all. In fact, it doesn't even have a public option. So why the dissonance here?
We need to move towards universal health care that's high quality and nearly cost-free for Americans around the country. But reality is we have millions of Americans who are on private insurance right now, and taking those plans away from them very quickly would be untenable for many, many Americans. To me, the goal of the government has to be to demonstrate that we can outcompete private plans and then push them out of the market over time. And that's what we're proposing.
But I'm confused. Your ad is explicit. Your ad says Medicare for all. Your plan is not Medicare for all. It's not even Medicare for some, because in your plan there's not even a public option.
Our plan is to expand a universal health care system to all Americans. Medicare for all is not the name of a bill. Medicare for all is universal health care for all Americans.
But Medicare for all is Medicare for all, right? I mean...
Well, our health care plan would be based on Medicare and expanding it over time to more and more Americans. You lower the eligibility age and then you make it widely accessible.
Okay, I didn't see that in your plan, but I want to move forward to the question of your.
Okay, now. I guess Jonathan Karl does not realize that, Medicare for all is Medicare for all. There's actually is an explicit bill. Like, there's a number. I can't remember what it is. 481 or something. I can't remember. In the Senate and the House. There are explicit bills. So he's wrong. Or he's lying. And just listen to, if it even sounds like Medicare for all. On his campaign site, under a heading called Medicare for All, he has controlled the cost of life-saving prescription drugs through negotiating drug prices using international reference pricing, forced licensing, public manufacturing facilities, and importation. So I don't know exactly. I mean, some of those things work. It's unclear for me on whose behalf he's negotiating. Right? Like, are you negotiating just on the existing Medicare? It's unclear. Number 2, invest in technologies to make health services function efficiently and reduce waste. All right, so get rid of waste in the system. But again, what system are you talking about? Is he saying that, like, when we invest in technologies, are we going to give those to the hospitals? In other words, are we going to spend tax dollars to make hospitals more efficient to increase their profit margin? Like, how do we get that money back that we invest? Like, how do we get the return on that investment? Then he also says, change the incentive structure by offering flexibility to providers, prioritizing patients over paperwork, and increasing the supply of practitioners. How do we, like, who does that? How do we increase the supply of practitioners? Do we just roll back regulations saying, like, just pre-med, you're a doctor? Or how does that work? Like through what mechanism do we, or whoever we are, touch the medical service? I mean, the medical industry. We do it in many different ways. We do it through Medicaid. We do it through Medicare. We do it through patenting of drugs, but none of this is specific. Shift our focus in educating ourselves in preventative care and end-of-life care options. In other words, wellness. Try and convince people to get more involved in wellness. Great idea. The ACA offered a lot of incentives for that. And guess what? Didn't work. The ACA has a bunch of that stuff. Ensure crucial aspects of well-being, including mental health, care for people with disabilities, HIV, AIDS detection, treatment, reproductive health, maternal care, dental, and vision are addressed and integrated into comprehensive care for the 21st century. Folks, I got to tell you something. That doesn't say anything. How do we ensure that? These are just like broad, like these aren't even ideas. They're
like
just
a
sort
Christmas
of
list.
It's not even as specific as a Christmas list. It's like, what do you want for Christmas? Really good stuff. Anything specific? Yeah, super good stuff. Overtime. I would like to get good stuff for Christmas. And then last is diminish the influence of lobbyists and special interests in the healthcare industry that makes it nearly impossible to draft and pass me. How do we diminish the influence of lobbyists? You cannot diminish the influence of lobbyists. You can only diminish the power to lobby or the potential rewards of lobbying. And the only way you can do that is to cut them out of this business or to cut their revenue so significantly they don't have the ability to pay for lobbyists who will handle anything down the middle. On top of which, on his website, which, of course, I think if anybody who knows this program at all, move away from defensive medicine. Doctors operate under constant threat of malpractice lawsuits. These cases are only decided by a verdict 5% of the time, and when they are, they land in the doctor's favor 80% of the time. Well, the reason why is because 95% of the time, doctors realize, or hospitals realize, they effed up, and so they settle. Despite the fact that doctors are almost always exonerated, malpractice suits can take years. As a result, doctors prescribe needless procedures and tests to avoid being sued. Look, all this work has already been done. We know that rolling back in malpractice reform didn't do anything for insurance rates or doctors' behaviors. We know that. There's plenty of research in terms of Texas. There's other states. Go back and look at Atul Gawande's seminal piece about two different towns in Texas. and their Medicare reimbursement rates. The fact of the matter is that doctors prescribe procedures when they own the mechanism to perform those procedures. If I have a hammer and a saw, as opposed to just a screwdriver, then every time somebody comes to see me, I'm going to use those hammers and saws. But there is Andrew Yang. And, you know, when you combine that with, and I'm still stuck on him being on Dave Rubin's show and basically saying, like, this is a way for us to, his freedom dividend back in the day, this is a way for us to eventually get rid of the social welfare state. Because he's going to force people to choose, do you want your $850 worth of benefits a month? Or do you want $1,000 worth of benefits a month? When we know that the $850, and these are hypothetical numbers, not his, but mine, is insufficient. And frankly, also, maybe it's insufficient, but at least relative to the context around them, it's a benefit that helps, relatively speaking, right? I mean,
you have to choose between SSDI and Yang Bucks, but you don't have to choose between your mortgage deduction and Yang Bucks.
Right. And here's the bottom line, though, is like the idea that relativity in terms of money is irrelevant seems foolish to me. And I understand UBI has worked in, controlled environments, in limited environments. And I do think there's something to it. And I think it's definitely worth trying. But to use it as a mechanism to roll back the welfare state, if you want to call it that, I think it's very dangerous. I mean, well, but that, I mean, look, if the guy's not supportive of Medicare for all and just has this sort of like, I don't even know what this plan is. I mean, honestly, I couldn't pull a single thing out of that was substantive in any way. It's all great ideas, but it is like, what do you want for Christmas? Really great stuff. Overtime. Not all at once. I couldn't handle that. It's time to get real, folks. Clown time is over. If you want, if you are supportive of Andrew Yang because you perceive him as having progressive ideals, I mean, I can understand if you're a libertarian and you're supportive of Yang, some level. I mean, at least it's consistent.
Has anybody asked him in a debate yet, like, what sort of regulations he would put in place to control against prices just going up as a result of everyone having $1,000 more a month?
I mean, that, I think, you could ask him the same question about 1 through 5 of these things. Yeah. Like, how do you control the cost of life-saving prescription drugs? Through negotiating drug prices with whom? On whose behalf? Like Medicare? Why wasn't even use the word? Invest in technologies. Like, okay, so the United States government invests in technologies for telehealth and for modernizing who gets the benefit of that? Like, where's the guarantee these hospitals are going to go like, we just saved, whatever it is, $10 million this year on inefficiencies. We should give that back to the patients.
I had a lot of arguments 6 months ago with Yang supporters, and they would always mention, well, he also supports Medicare for all. We now know, conclusively he doesn't. And I also mentioned housing stuff, and I'm looking at his housing, and it's all about zoning laws and the sort of anti-NIMBY which is fine, I guess.
Right.
But, that's not going to change landlords from...
maybe necessary, but insufficient.
Exactly.
Lastly, the other big story, over the past couple of weeks. Well, I should start with, there was so meanwhile, Donald Trump's Iran maximize pressure. Well, some people are saying it's not even a strategy. It just seems to be a goal, like an end goal in and of itself, right? Like usually in foreign policy, what you do is you do things because you want some type of outcome, a specific type of outcome. And it appears that Donald Trump's Iran policy is literally just, I guess it's like it's war hawk virtue signaling. And that's the ends. We just want to make it clear that we don't like Iran. And therefore, we'll get more from Saudi Arabia and I guess support. We can show that we support Israel. And so ultimately, Trump keeps making these red lines, and Iran keeps basically saying, like, you don't have the juice to back this stuff up. And we should say that there are protests in Iran because sanctions have been reimposed, and the Iranian people are suffering. Meanwhile, in Iraq, an Iranian-backed Iraqi militia, and for those of us who we're talking about the war 15 years ago, it was quite clear what was going to happen, and that Iran was going to gain the upper hand in Iraq, just because of the predominance of Shia versus Sunni there, and because they were already well positioned, and that's what's happened. The Kataib Hezbollah fired on an Iraqi military base in Iraq. 4 U.S. servicemen were wounded, and an American contractor was killed. That was about, almost 2 weeks ago. Sunday, that would have been this past Sunday, U.S. launched airstrikes against that same militia's forces in Iraq and Syria, killed 24 people, wounded about 50. And then in response to that, 2 days ago, thousands of supporters of the Kataib and Hezbollah and other pro-Iranian militias stormed the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. They have since, by Wednesday, the protests were less violent. As of today, my understanding is the U.S. Embassy is secured. Remember, the embassy there is massive. And now the U.S. is deploying, I think, another 4,000 troops to the region. I guess they go to Kuwait, and I don't know how many come in. Maybe 750 go to the embassy. It's unclear to me. But this is another example of the failure of Donald Trump's foreign policy. Which is not to say that it wasn't, look, a lot of this stuff is preordained with George Bush. But one of the best things that Barack Obama did as president was to forge a deal with Iran and begin to bring them into the international community. There's still a lot of problems with Iran. Still a proxy war between them and Saudi Arabia. But it was a start in the right direction. That's been unwound now. Here is Steve Doocy on Fox and Friends. Well places. Talking to Michael Waltz. He's a representative from Florida to praise Iran for the strategy. Now, of course, this guy, I imagine he is in a part of Florida where there might be, sort of some deep-held pro-Israel sentiments, and maybe that's what this is about. But it's also just sort of the posturing. Here we go.
The sound bites that we played earlier, where members of the media have portrayed this essentially as Trump's fault, the reaction to what we have seen over at the embassy in Baghdad. Others have suggested the Politico headline is Trump tries to avoid his own Benghazi. Do you see parallels between what happened in Baghdad over the last 48 hours and Benghazi?
No, I don't actually. The only parallel is that it's an embassy. There are parallels, I think, with what Iran has traditionally tried to do in 1979 when it stormed our embassy in Tehran, and was, what did we do? We were feckless back then. We didn't meet it with strength. We met it with strength this time, and Iran has backed down, and its proxies have backed down. Now, what they're going to try to do is work through the Iraqi parliament to get us removed from Iraq. That's their ultimate goal. But at the end of the day, they want to dominate the region. The regime is desperate. Mr. President, the maximum pressure campaign is working. Stay strong. And at the end of the day, the regime will either have to come back to the negotiating table from a position of weakness, or it will face internal economic collapse. So what we're doing overall strategically is working, and this is how they're going to lash out.
All right, let's see what happens next. Colonel?
All right.
Congressman? Sir, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Yeah. Now, what is the ultimate, like what we're doing strategically, but there's no end goal to this, right? Like, there's no negotiation. There's like, what is that? What they're going to come back to the negotiation table and do what? Agree to stop their nuclear weapons program? Or they're going to just completely roll back everything and cede the entire region to Saudi Arabia. Is that what's supposedly going to happen? Because we have no example of regimes who are ruling over people who are in desperate straits, right? Like that, we have no example of that with that we've seen that Donald Trump has been maybe playing footsie with, like North Korea. I mean, it's just absurd. But that's where we're at.
It's all going according to plan.
Yes. Look at that. I'm tough on Iran. All right, folks. Going to take a quick break and head into the fun half. Just a reminder, this program in 2020, as it did in 2019, relies on your support. You can become a member and support this program at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, we give you extra content every day. We give you the free show commercial free. And, well, you help this program, reach other people. We're going to try and do maybe a little bit of marketing this year. See if we can't expand our reach. I don't know.
Will we be using Mike Cernovich again?
I'm going to ask Mike Cernovich to pitch in. We'll see. I'm not sure. But your support makes it all possible. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, AM Quickie, still quicking it up in the morning. You can listen to top news briefs, and it's all free. You can access it via the app. You can go to MajorityApp.com. You can hear the Majority Report, Daily Majority Report, and the Daily AM Quickie. It's there. It's one of the tabs. Or you can just sign up directly at amquickie.com. What else did we have? That's about it. Oh, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off. TMBS is Friday this week.
Yep, tomorrow night.
Assuming Michael's back from his vacation.
I think he will be.
His extended vacation. You can check that out at patreon.com/TMBS. Of course, Jamie's The Intifada. You can check it out at patreon.com/The Intifada. And Matt, what's happening with Literary Hangover 2020?
Yeah, well, we released The Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, a very, very popular old fable. And we'll be doing The Sotweed Factor by Ebenezer Cook. And then we'll be talking about Bacon's Rebellion coming up. You know much about Bacon's Rebellion?
It sounds familiar to me.
It's very interesting. I wouldn't want to summarize it yet because I haven't done all the research, but interesting stuff.
Where did it take place?
In Virginia and Maryland.
Okay, no, I only know all the rebellions that took place in Massachusetts, like Shays Rebellion.
Oh yeah,
it's a much more interesting rebellion, frankly.
Than Bacon's?
It's pretty interesting.
Bacon's is pretty interesting. Well, I don't know. We'll litigate that on Literary Hangover. Patreon.com/Literary Hangover.
There we go. We'll wait. I'll wait for the Shays Rebellion episode.
That'll be the first one you listen to.
You let me know when that happens. 646-257-3920 is the number. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238. 56, 27, 1/2, 5 eighths, 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agreed.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a quick call. Calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, hi. Happy New Year.
Mindy, Happy New Year.
How are you?
I'm great.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
What I wanted to say is you're not talking about how much money Bernie raised in December.
Well, I'm just about to do that, Mindy. In fact, I've got that story right in front of me. Bernie Sanders, I don't know if I have it broken down specifically as to December, but in the last quarter, Bernie Sanders raised and I can't quite figure this out. Did we figure this out, whether it was a record all time or just certainly within this race? He raised almost $35 million.
It was the record, right, 34.5, something like that?
Yeah, $34.5 million in the fourth quarter of 2019. He got more than 1.8 million different unique donations in the quarter. The average donation, $18.53. They have hit 5 million donors in 2019, which is nuts. His fourth quarter total, larger than any candidate has raised in a single quarter so far in this primary race. And it may be in all primary races. I'm not 100% sure about that. That's a lot of money. And here's the thing that is really relevant. 99.99% of the donors have not maxed out. 99.99%. Now, I know, someone's going to do the math. I don't know what that is, how many tens of thousands that is under 5 million voters, right? Maybe that's a couple 100,000 have maxed out. I think that's just mostly the Chapo Trap House guys. But there it is. Bernie Sanders. And, I think I had said sometime in December, January is where you're going to start to see more attacks on Bernie, because there's going to be a realization that he's not going to go away, and that he's certainly not losing any support. And in some of the early states, he's gaining support. And so this is, I think this is, the next 3 months are really going to determine who wins this race, I think. And Sanders having this type of momentum is huge.
Do you think they're going to let him have the nomination? I don't think they're going to let him have the nomination, personally. I don't know what they're going to do, but I fucking hate Joe Biden.
Well, I understand, Mindy. And
I hate him. He scares me. He said something about black people recently. He said something horrible since he said about the Republican nomination. I heard it on the fly, and I have to find it. But I know he's just a freaking mess. I hate him. I don't think he can. Do you think he can win over Trump?
Well, like I say, I think it's problematic. And let me I just got a correction. I said 5 million donors. It's 5 million distinct donations. He added 300,000 new donors. So I don't know how many unique donors he has. But it's got to be over 1 million at this point. But nevertheless, yeah, do I think that Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump? Maybe. I think that, let's put it this way. I think he's the riskiest of the top 3 candidates. I think Pete Buttigieg is not. I think Pete Buttigieg is rather overrated in terms of his chances of winning the nomination. But I think Joe Biden is the riskiest, because I think he is so prone. His politics are really, I think, not great. And I think my feeling is that the voters who support him now are the most reliable voters in the Democratic Party. And I think those people are going to come out and vote for any of the candidates. I think the other candidates.
Okay, so this is the way I feel about it. Personally, if Bernie doesn't get the nomination, I don't really particularly like anybody in the race. I still like Elizabeth, but I don't think she's going to make it. Buttigieg makes my stomach turn. And there's really nobody else. I would vote, and this is horrible to say, but if Bernie's not the nominee, I hope it's like Klobuchar over Biden. I think anybody over Biden is better than Biden.
I would think that Klobuchar would have a better chance of winning than Biden.
In terms of favorability, I just can't stand him. And I don't know, personally, he scares the living shit out of me. He's probably a nice person, if you had dinner with him, but he's not, he's just going to screw things up worse. Don't you think?
Yeah.
That's just the way I feel.
I agree. I agree.
So I just wanted to let you know how I feel, that I'm Bernie. I can't stand Biden. Buttigieg makes me nauseous. And I'm just really getting unmotivated at this point. I'm not unmotivated to the point where I won't vote.
Well, no. Listen, what you got to do is you got to go out and phone bank for Bernie. Phone bank in Iowa, phone bank in New Hampshire. That's what needs to happen.
I just don't think they're going to let him have the nomination. I think they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that they screw this up so bad that he's just not the
I don't know who the they is, But yes, I think there is a significant portion of the Democratic Party that wants somebody other than Bernie Sanders. But I don't think that they are, magicians. I don't think that they are foolish enough to, I don't know what, like give Bernie the wrong time to show up at the convention and, do like, I think, I don't know who the they is that you keep referring to, but I don't think that,
in my opinion, I don't know anything, but in my opinion, I think that they are the Democratic people in power that have a lot of money, that have a lot of power, that don't want any of that to be ruined.
I think, Mike Bloomberg is going to spend a lot of money to try and make sure that doesn't happen, that Bernie doesn't win.
Do you think Bloomberg's better than Biden, Sam?
Oh. No.
Seriously, think about it. Like, is Bloomberg better? My girlfriend, Jay's wife, Jay's wife's my best friend, Jay,
right.
From Connecticut. She's my best friend. We were talking about it this morning. I mean, do we vote for Bloomberg or Biden? Seriously, like if it comes down to that.
Well, it will not come down to that.
Better.
Vote for Bernie.
I know. I'm saying, is Biden better than Bloomberg? Really, think about it.
I don't have to think about it because it's not ever a decision I'll have to make. Bloomberg will not run against Biden in the general. Bloomberg and Biden are not, either one of them are not on my list to vote for in the primary. So they're bad in different ways. I don't want to waste my energy trying to determine which is worse. I think.
So we're never going to get to that. So it's going to be Biden versus Bernie, you think?
If I had to guess right now, that would be my guess. But I would say that's a soft guess. But I think that it's ultimately going to be yes between Biden and Bernie. But again, we don't have to speculate. What we need to do is make phone calls and rally your friends. And, Super Tuesday, by Super Tuesday, we're going to know. I think at least be in a much better position to guess.
Very last thing. There's a lot of people that are my age that are talking about how Bernie, no, this is not my opinion, okay? Granted, this is not my opinion. But I'm talking about the 60 states, the middle class 60 states. In the suburbs, they're talking about how Bernie, because they're so ignorant, Bernie is the Trump on the left. Like, I hear a lot of that coming, that Bernie is the Trump on the left. And they have no information to back it up. They're just saying it.
Well, okay. It doesn't mean anything.
Right. It doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. Without any further specificity, it would be like, you mean the guy who's able to beat Donald Trump?
Yeah, I don't know. There just seems to be a stigma around Bernie.
Well, of course.
For people my age.
Of course.
And I feel like when I talk about it, I'm in the minority.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Democrat friends, I feel like I'm in the minority.
I wouldn't be surprised. Bernie Sanders, if he wins the nomination, is not going to win because he got a majority of people over the age of 55 to vote for him. It's going to be, he's going to mitigate his loss to Biden in those numbers, but that's not going to be it.
All right. On the good note, my millennial children, when they were here for Thanksgiving and Hanukkah, they were definitely on the Bernie tree.
Of course. That also makes sense.
That's 6.
Keep faith. Keep hope alive.
All right. Bye, Sam.
It's great to talk to you.
Year, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Happy New Year. Mindy, ladies and gentlemen.
You too.
The first caller in 2020. Here's Bernie Sanders. This is pretty good. Here's Bernie Sanders. The first clip. Let's play the first clip. This is a guy from Von Hilliard, who is an MSNBC reporter.
What was that look? That's a totally normal name if you went to boarding school in the Northeast.
I know. There was a kid I knew in Worcester whose name was like Winship something, and we called him Trip, and I didn't understand like any of what any of that meant. I was like, whatever. I came from an era where everybody's name was like Sam, John, Dave, Jim, Betty, Mary. That was it.
Yeah, we don't get Von Hilliards in North Dakota.
No.
All my friends in high school are literally named John.
Here is Bernie talking to this guy in August. And I get the feeling, I don't know the story behind this, but there is a sense that he's annoyed by this dude. And even back in August. And if I was Sanders, I'd be a little bit annoyed too, frankly, because, statistically speaking, there is no doubt that Bernie Sanders has been ignored by the corporate media. Not just ignored, but at times where they've had to sort of twist themselves into pretzels to pretend like he's not been in the race. And personally, I think that's helped Sanders up to this point. I think at one point it becomes a liability, but I think up to this point it's helped. Because if they're going to pay attention to Bernie, it's not going to be in a positive way for the most part. And his whole theory of change, largely makes some of what cable news does, somewhat irrelevant. In that respect, I would also say very different from Donald Trump. Donald Trump was very much a cable news candidate. Bernie Sanders is not. Here he is back in August, where I don't know what it must feel like to have someone just quote to you an absolute fake poll almost, but here it is.
Last thing we'll let you go. Your polling numbers here in Iowa have gone down a little bit.
No, you're looking at one poll which the media seems to like to talk about.
And so how does Bernie Sanders rise to the top of the polls here in Iowa?
Actually, if you look at the reports of polling since the last debate, guess which candidate has gone up the most? Thank you very much.
There you go. I mean, it's weird. When you see people pushing one poll, just the latest poll, there's always a half a dozen polls that come out on any given day. Some are more reputable than others, but all people involved in politics, they look more or less at the trend and what the sort of the average is, because that gives you the best notion of it. And Von Hilliard he took it on the chin there. At one point, it looked like he was getting a little bit into Bernie's space, and Bernie was like, back off, buddy. But here is Von Hilliard again with Bernie. Now, this had just happened, I don't know, like 2 or 3 days ago in Iowa. And he's pushing. It's just an interesting frame. Why do you have the policies you have is what the question is.
Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg are saying, pick us because we have the more practical approach to health care. Why not go the public option route first?
Because it doesn't work.
The Medicare.
But how much does public option cost? You got the number? What's the number exactly? Oh, we don't know what the number is. And the number is, once again, the current system, which they are defending with minor tweaks, is far and away the most expensive system in the world. We're spending twice what the Canadians spend. They manage to guarantee health care to all people. The function of health care is quality care for all, not to make the drug companies rich and the insurance companies rich. It is a disgrace beyond words that last year, the top 6 drug companies made $69 billion in profits, and yet 1 out of 5 Americans cannot even afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. So let me just say this, and that is, I know that it's not easy taking on the healthcare industry that made $100 billion in profits last year. But I think after 100 years of talk about the need for healthcare for all, now is the time to do that. And that is exactly what our administration will do. Let me
Senator, I know you're going to knock on the window. We're live on MSNBC. Could we ask you the one quick question here on this front? Because you were talking about health care and compared to Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden's proposal. For folks at home, we're 4 days away from the Iowa caucus here. There's a lot of folks we still talk to that say they're trying to decide between Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren here. I know we can go to BernieSanders.com and look through all your detailed plans here, but top line, what would you say your biggest contrast
one of the differences,
is? Why they should go for you?
I'm not into attacking my colleagues. We're about differentiating the differences of issues. And I think maybe one of the major differences is what I have said over and over again, and I just repeated it right now. In my first week in office, we will introduce Medicare for All single-payer program. And in our first year, what we will be able to do is expand Medicare coverage to include dental care, hearing aids, eyeglasses, and home health care. And in the first year of a 4-year transition period, 4 years, we lowered the eligibility age for Medicare from 65 to 55. There are millions of people, I suspect, in this community, all over this country, who are so anxious to get into Medicare, and that's what we're going to do. We expand Medicare, we lower it,
Senator Warren
and
also
we lower the
has that
cost
position
of
though,
health
too,
care.
right?
No, it's that Senator Warren's position is a little bit different. Check it out. I think her transition period is quite different.
Fun Hilliard's just like ask him questions to get reactions out of him, get rises out of him. But think about the once you get past the leather coat that he's wearing, think about the framing of this. Their plan is more practical, and the reality is this, folks. And sometimes I worry that people are expectations of Bernie's ability to deliver Medicare for all may be unrealistic. But so isn't every other plan. Like the difference in being able to do Medicare for all and the versions that Pete Buttigieg and Joe Biden are talking about, from a political standpoint, it's sort of impossible to assess. Like the biggest hump is to get to any of those plans. But once you get past that, it's like, I don't know. Can people really assess the difference between an $800 billion stimulus plan and what it would have taken politically to get a $1.2 trillion stimulus plan? I don't think so. Would it be harder? Maybe, arguably, but not necessarily if you've set the bar, the expectations higher. Maybe it's always this dynamic. That it's always like, 10% harder than where you've set the expectations. That dynamic where they say like, no matter how much money you make, you're always, unless you're a billionaire, I guess, spending, 15% more than your income is or whatever it is. Maybe that dynamic exists. We really don't know. There's not, the political science on this is really inconclusive. So why wouldn't you go for more? You go for the policy that you think is the best policy. But this guy is framing it as if it's a more practical solution. And Bernie's response is it's not practical because it doesn't work. Like, it's not clear that it's politically more practical. And it's certainly clear that it's not materially more practical. But this is the framing that we're going to hear. We're going to hear this in the debates. We're going to hear it in the general election debate, if that's what it is. We're going to hear it in the primary debates. This is the framing that they always use. When the reality is we are paying more. It's more expensive. It's not efficient. That's the reality. And then, the last comment in terms of his differentiation with Warren, I think he does a good job there, because really, I think the differentiation with Warren, and it's indicative of, or I should say it's reflected in the reporting that we've seen of Warren on the campaign trail. People can go check out what Dave Weigel's saying on Twitter. The bottom line is she's, according to Weigel, at the rallies that she has where she's taking questions, she's not getting questions about Medicare for all. And I think in the context of her campaign, Medicare for all is not the priority it is for Warren as it is for Sanders. Now, I happen to think, I'm skeptical on some level of her legislative plan for it. I don't think she needed to present that. I don't think she needed to present the pay-fors and whatnot. I'm not as skeptical about it, I think, as a lot of people are. I think it's quite conceivable that in the 2022 congressional election, House and Senate, the Senate actually favors Democrats more than any other election that we've had in the past, one or two cycles leading up to that, at least. I think it's quite conceivable. In the right circumstance, you could have Democrats maintain the House and Senate. But regardless, I think one thing is clear. It's just not the priority that it is for Warren as it is for Sanders. And that's why Sanders is making a point. Like, a week one, I'm going to do this stuff. I'm going to do it administratively. And I think that's a fair assessment. And your mileage may vary as to what you think is the most important thing. But I think the argument from Sanders would be, once you do that, once you, essentially undercut an incredibly powerful industry and lobby, B, you free up so many Americans, free them up in terms of time, in terms of cost, in terms of the relationship with their employer. That opens up a whole new host of political possibilities. The best theory I've heard about why we had so many sort of like emancipatory social movements in the 60s is because you had 10 to 15 years of what they call the Great Compression, where you had economic growth that was more equally distributed than it ever had been in the United States. And as people gained a certain amount of economic security, they started taking more political power. And I would think, I don't know this for sure, but I would think that that is the theory. That when you look at healthcare as one of the primary expenses that we have as, as Americans. So you rent, your housing, and then healthcare are fixed costs and are ones that particularly healthcare can make you, bring you into severe financial distress. And by healthcare, we're talking, I'm having to take care of my parents. I'm having to deal with them getting into a nursing home. I've got to get a root canal. I've got to get whatever it is. And once you take that off the board, just the sheer amount of time and filing claims and whatnot. Chasing down insurance companies and seeing who you owe and the 14 different places you got to bill if you go to the emergency room. Did we make our deductible? All those things, once those are sort of like off the table, I think the idea is that there's going to be a lot more political power that people are going to have. So, I don't know, your mileage may vary, but that's what I think is the case. Let's go back to the phones here. Let's see. Wow, we got a lot of people on the phones here. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let's take this one. Calling from a 289 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is that me that you've got there?
I think it is. Are you?
Oh, fantastic.
All right.
I am me. I'm pretty sure. I think so. It's a tautology, right? How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm actually calling from Canada, from Guelph. What I wanted to ask you about was actually animal ethics. I've debated a good few people on this, like your good friend Stefan Molyneux, and some other people on more like your side, Destiny, Bosch, people like that. I wanted to ask about your stance for a minute, if that's okay.
Sure.
Cool. So obviously, if we were to replace the animals that are being farmed right now with humans, you'd deem that situation to be morally unacceptable, right?
if human beings were being raised for food?
Yeah, if we just replace all the animals currently being farmed with humans.
Right. Yes, I think I would find that unacceptable.
Okay. Now, if we are doing it with animals, though, you take it to be acceptable?
I think that's where our society's at. I mean, I personally try and avoid factory farmed animals, but you know, and I see it as problematic. I don't see it as a top priority in terms of like at least what I want to do professionally in terms of politics.
I could ask it like this. Do you think that it's morally acceptable to buy those products?
Do I think it's morally acceptable? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, for me personally, I don't do it.
Mm-hmm. Wait, but you're not vegan. You do buy the products, right?
Well, when I eat meat, I try and do non-factory farmed meat.
Okay, but you still buy the meat, correct?
Oh yeah, I am not vegan.
Right. Okay. So, but the point here would be, if it's animals, you wouldn't say it's okay to buy, 90. If it's humans, you wouldn't say it's okay to buy, mostly free-range human, just a tiny bit of factory.
Absolutely right. That's correct. I do not believe that we should. I have less of a problem with eating animals than I do with humans.
Okay, so this is where I'm going with it, right? If in the animal context it's okay to, buy the family farmed animals and occasionally the factory farmed animals, but in the human context, neither are okay.
Right.
I'm wondering, what is it? Pardon me?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm just wondering, what is it that's true of the animals that, if true of the humans, would cause you to say that that is acceptable? So that's the gotcha question.
I mean, I think for me, honestly, it's watching animals kill each other in the wild, and there not being any sort of determination that it's wrong by the animals. I mean, in all honesty, I don't feel, I don't have a sort of like clear, strongly held beliefs in these areas. But I mean, if you're asking in passing, I would say the thing that I think allows me to not prioritize it, although I think that there's certainly a decent argument to prioritize it. I think the thing for me is watching animals in the wild kill each other, and them not appearing to organize around it and determine that it's wrong.
Okay, so you would say that the thing that makes the moral difference, that makes it such that you'd say in the human context,
you're using moral difference. I don't know if I think it's moral or immoral. I'm not really thinking about it in those terms. But
in the human case, sorry to cut you off. In the human case, you say it's immoral, though, right?
Well, we've certainly decided as a society that killing is wrong.
I'm not asking society. I'm asking you.
Okay. Well, I live in society, and I live in a society where we've decided that it's wrong. And I don't know if I didn't live in a society and I was, living on the land and, let me put it this way. If we have some type of, nuclear event, or we're living in some type of, so-called post-apocalyptic world, I don't know that I would think it would be wrong to kill humans.
Right, but what I asked was what makes the moral difference between the two situations.
And I'm telling you, I'm sorry, I just don't, I don't think about it in terms of morality. I'm giving you the most honest answer I can.
You think don't you say it's morally wrong in the human context? That sounds like thinking in terms of morality. If you say you don't think it's morally wrong to, just Holocaust people, then okay, but I take it that's not your view.
Well, look, you want me to keep saying moral because that's what's helpful for your argument, and I don't know if you want...
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Sorry, you just cut out.
You want me to keep saying moral because that's the way that you look at it. I'm telling you that
Do you look at it, if it's something other than moral, then we can talk about that. Do you not look at killing humans as a moral issue? The Holocaust of humans for food, that wouldn't be a moral issue on your view?
I just think that it's, I don't know that it's like, I don't know.
Well, it's a straightforward question, not to be rude. Is that a moral issue or not?
What is morality? Explain that to me. What's your vision of morality?
I'm a subjectivist. I mean, I just take morality to be about our preferences.
Okay, it is against my preference. It is against my preference. Let me put it this way. I'm going to use your term. It is against my preference that we kill human beings because, and I'll tell you why, because I think it's the only way for humans to survive is to not kill each other. And I think it is, at the very least, it is the start of being nicer to everything if we don't kill human beings, because we relate to human beings the most. So
okay, so if we want
that's my preference.
Replace the word
as to why it is not to my a high priority of my preference. It would be my preference.
Well, that's not quite what I'm asking.
Well, no. Listen, I know what you're asking. Okay. And I'm telling you that my answer does not fit into the narrow confines of what you want. I'm giving you my honest answer. Well, you asked me why it's not as important to me that animals, that people eat animals.
I didn't say not as important. That's not what I asked.
You said moral. You just described moral as preference. Now I'm telling you. Go ahead. What's going on? Hold on. Your phone is breaking up. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I asked you what's true of the one that, if true of the other, would cause you to have the same evaluation.
I've told you.
Just to clear up the morality thing, do you not use the language of morality at all? Because in my view, it's like if you're not using it in the case of holocausting humans, then, I can't see where else you possibly use it, right? Do you just not use moral language?
I mean,
I'm happy to move to subjectivist kind of preference language. That's fine. That's actually the language
I tend not to use moral language. That is correct. At least in the context of this show.
Not to do sure. So not to do a big philosophy derail, but you're some kind of subjectivist, like you think morality
I don't know what that means, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, well, I'll just ask with the word preference, right? So it is in line with your preference for us to support the Holocaust of animals to some degree, family farming with some degree of factory farming. But it is not in line with your preference to support the Holocaust of humans, some amount of factory farming and some amount of family farming of humans. So I'm asking
correct.
What is it that's true of animals that, if true of humans, would cause you to say that is in line with your preferences?
If human beings went around killing each other without deciding as societies that it's wrong, my ideas would change.
Okay, I understand your answer. Now, the response to that answer would be to say, okay, so if everyone else was just killing each other, do you right now take the view that in that world it would just be ethical to Holocaust people and eat them?
To Holocaust people and
eat them, yes.
If everybody was killing each other?
From your view, don't answer from their view. I'm asking if you would evaluate it to be appropriate so long as others are killing each other.
Maybe. It's a hard hypothetical for me to put myself into right now, but maybe. I'm open to it. Let's put it that way.
Well, okay, wait. So just to be clear, your view, and I don't want any equivocation here. I'm not asking if your preference.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm going to equivocate on your hypothetical about everybody going around killing each other.
I wasn't necessarily accusing you of equivocating. I just want to make sure that there isn't an equivocation. Right?
Well, I'm telling you, I'm going to reserve my right to equivocate because I need to know more details about this post-apocalyptic world that you're talking about, that I'm also able to organize a factory farm when everybody's going around killing each other.
Okay, what do you think the equivocation is that I'm referring to?
I don't know. You're just saying I don't want you to equivocate, and I'm telling you, I can equivocate. You're not my dad.
You're kind of trying to derail with humor, though, because I've got you in a bit of a corner, right?
No, you don't.
So the equivocation that I'm worried about, right? The equivocation is I'm not asking what your preference inside of the hypothetical would be. I'm asking for you right now, in your perspective, to evaluate the hypothetical. I'll walk you through the reasoning you gave, right? So we took the two situations, the human and animal holocaust.
Dude, I don't need a hypothetical. I just told you why I have less of an issue with eating animals than I do humans.
Wait. You said the thing that makes the moral difference is whether the
No,
rest
you
of
said the thing that
killing
makes
each
the
other
moral
cares
difference.
about it.
You said the thing that makes the moral difference.
Then we can remove the word moral if that's what you're complaining about.
Right. The thing that makes the difference to me is that I watch animals kill each other.
Right. So what I'm doing is I'm applying that in the human context and asking if you then evaluate it to be ethical. If you say no, it's a contradiction.
Yes,
yes,
I answered your question. I answered it.
Sam, you have to understand, when you yell, I actually can't hear. It maxes out my phone, please.
Oh, in which case, I'm going to turn up my volume because I'm getting a little frustrated. I'm going to say this quietly, okay?
Sure.
If
yeah, go ahead.
we lived in a world where there were no societal norms about killing other human beings and eating them, okay, which I have noticed in the animal kingdom, including like my cats.
You cut out. You have what in the animal? Sorry, you cut out. You have what in the animal kingdom?
Doesn't work.
I think he's trying to just get a sound bit that he can isolate and then post somewhere.
Okay. So I just to be clear, it sounds like you're getting fed up with the call, so I don't want to take up all your time if you want to go. But I just want to be clear about what the question is, right? So I was just asking, what is it that's true of the animal Holocaust that, if true of the human Holocaust, would cause it to be morally justified on your view? You said the factor that would make that difference, right? And morality can just cash out in preferences. That's fine. You said the factor that would make the difference is if the other members of the species are killing each other and not caring about it. Now, I put the reductio to you. Where
and
I say,
eating each other.
Let me complete the thought.
And eating
Let
each
me
other.
complete the thought. Oh, and eating. Okay, yeah. So if other humans are killing and eating each other and don't care about it, would you actually evaluate it to be ethical to Holocaust people? And your answer to that is yes or no. You can laugh at it all you want, but
I'm going to. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for giving me the permission to laugh.
Can you actually get around the case, though? What's your reply to that? Is it ethical or not?
Is it ethical? I think if society...
Is it in line with your preferences? That's what we're taking ethical to mean.
If society has found it to be non-problematic to go around and kill human beings and eat them, then would I perceive it as problematic that we were doing it in a factory style as opposed to just random killing?
But keep in mind, I'm asking you right now. I'm not asking if hypothetically you and the hypothetical would have determined preferences that are different, right? I'm not asking in that world would your mind be shaped differently. I'm asking right now, you in this world, do you look at a hypothetical world where humans are killing and eating each other?
It would be my
that's
preference.
In line with your preference.
It would be my preference. This is going to be my final thing that I'm saying because I think this is honestly silly.
Sure. I don't think it's silly at all. I think.
Well, I know you don't, and that's why when you have a show, I'll call in if I have the time and talk to you about it. But this is my show.
I do. I'd love that.
What? Yeah, I'm sure. But this is my show. I find the question silly. But I will end it on this.
Okay, well,
I will end it on
silly.
this. I will end it on this.
Sure. All right, let's hear it.
As I stand today, living in a world where human society has deemed it wrong to kill each other, I also think it's impractical to kill each other. And society has broadly made the decision that we should not be doing this.
This is not answering the question.
I'm
not trying to be rude, but you're dodging the question.
All right.
Do you evaluate the Holocaust happening in that hypothetical to be ethical?
Now, listen, I had to hang up on you because you won't let me finish because I'm not answering it exactly as you want me to. But you are asking me to use my mind as it exists today in a world where we do have societal norms about killing other humans and eating them, and saying, use that mind, project yourself into an era where none of that exists, where people go around killing each other when they see him. I see Matt walk into my office. I don't even recognize Matt as like anything other than dinner. And I go and I kill him and I eat him. Now, but with my mind as it exists now, I need to project into that life that exists then and then say, would I have a problem with factory farming of human beings eating? And I would say, if I have today's mind in that scenario, yes, I would have a problem with that. Because, and then I would say, like, how did I get here? How come this is completely oblivious to me? I mean, how come, like, I can't understand any of the norms that are going on? But if I was to adopt the mindset where I see Matt and I think, well, all right, not say not Matt, because Matt is actually bigger, like taller, and I think that would intimidate me on some level in terms of whether I could go eat him. But if Brendan came in, I might think I could eat Brendan. And, like I don't even know how much conscious thought I would have. Like I've seen my cats go and kill animals.
Yeah, I'd be against factory cannibalism. Myself, I want my cannibalism done sort of like farm to table.
Yeah, Soylent Green is no good.
I mean, look, I think it's quite possible that society will evolve to such a place where the perception of the idea that we would eat animals would be like we looked upon slavery. I think that's conceivable to me. I mean, I certainly hope that society evolves in that way. I was raised eating meat. I have at times tried to stop eating meat totally. I've certainly cut down on it. Like ever since I got introduced to the Impossible Burger, I have not eaten a hamburger. I basically cut out red meat, in part for health reasons, but in part for I just, what it does to the planet. I mean, I don't necessarily, I'm not going to lie, I don't have a huge, I don't spend that much time thinking about how many cows or sheep or pigs that we slaughter. I have been very sort of I'm not gonna say I've been intimate with pigs, but I've been friendly with pigs and visited pigs every day. And I know that their owners, their plan was in October to slaughter them and put them in the freezer for the rest of, and then eat them over the course of the winter. That's just what it is. And that issue is just not the most prominent issue to me. I think that ultimately we need to get there for the health of the planet and for, I think it's more evolved of I think it's the ideas that we, have organized our society into in terms of not killing other human beings and eating them. I think we can carry over to other living things. I don't know where that stops. I mean, I don't know how sentient plants are. I definitely think that pigs are more sentient than cows, or I don't know, or just have more intellectual capacity. But I wonder is that a fair way of assessing these things? I don't know. I mean, is it? I mean, that can't be the solution, right? It can't be that pigs have more awareness of things than, I don't know, a frog. And that's the determination as to where you draw the line. I mean, do people not kill ants too? I don't know. I think, being a human being is always about compromises and about priorities. And people choose which things they want to prioritize. And then other human beings make assessment of their, of are these people good or not good people? And that's the way it works. I just, I'm sure I use moral language in some instances, but I try and avoid it as much as possible. Try and avoid it as much as possible. Just because, I don't know. I'm a little bit, I don't know. I'm a little bit more like Thanos.
Yeah.
Or wait, who is?
Yeah, you're Thanos. You're more concerned with sort of overall politics and individual morality, I think.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we should cut down on that farming. And then I think we should, part of it is a function of
You know, it was a Republican proposal to sort of like open up. Nixon's Commerce Secretary wanted more disposable income in people's hands, so we subsidized corn, and then we created essentially factory farming in that respect, and so there it is. But boy, is it annoying when people are just like determined, like, I'm going to set up this specific hypothetical for you.
I've thought through all the different routes.
And you cannot, in the hypothetical, you cannot project how you will react to a society. It has to be as if you just zoomed into that hypothetical with today's thinking in that hypothetical. So it's not enough that I give you the hypothetical. I now also want to give you a hypothetical about as to who you will be in the context of that hypothetical. I don't know what we were debating. Factory farming, I think, is bad. Do I think it would be nicer if I was a human being? Would I rather be in a factory before I got killed versus like living a nice life and then one day I just show up and somebody takes my head off? Probably the latter. I don't know that I would want either, frankly. In fact, I know I wouldn't.
You've dug yourself a bit of a hole here, Sam.
Right.
He's backed you there to a bit of a corner.
It's true. Hey, speaking about, this is pretty stunning. Here's Michael Bloomberg, who, as you know, is I don't know, how many hundreds, has he spent $100 million already? I mean, I don't know. He's spent so many dollars. This is pretty nuts. The Central Park 5. Is there anybody who hears the sound of my voice who doesn't know who I'm referring to? Is there anybody, let me put it this way. Is there anybody who lives in New York City above the age of 19 who couldn't know what I was referring to? Because it was huge news. When were these guys? It was in the 90s, right? Early 90s. Where 5 kids were basically coerced into a false confession that they had participated in a rape and beating of a woman in Central Park. That they were wilding, which is where like bands of brown-colored kids would go around and just beat up people in the parks, which of course was not happening. Donald Trump took out a full-page ad saying that they should get the death penalty. They were convicted. They were sent to jail. Over the years, people would talk about their innocence. Ken Burns and his daughter, I believe, did a documentary about them when they were ultimately exonerated through physical evidence, and I think actually the testimony from somebody who was actually involved in the crime. In fact, I think I interviewed Ken Burns about it on this program early on. I can't remember when. And then they, for years during the Bloomberg administration, the city of New York stonewalled instead of paying them reparations for the years that they were in prison during their, late teens and early 20s into their 30s. And then when de Blasio got in office, the city paid some restitution. The idea that anybody who lives in New York was not aware of any of that story, you'd have to be really, really oblivious. You'd have to be super oblivious. You'd have to have an agenda of I don't care about anybody
or any issues that impact criminal justice or just justice in general or race or whatnot. Well, imagine if you were the mayor who was in charge of keeping the city from stonewalling that and you didn't know what ultimately happened with that case. You'd be Michael Bloomberg.
We started talking about race, and a subject that's come up a lot is the Central Park Five. And when you were mayor of New York, you defended the city and the police department's handling of this Central Park Five case. You argued that they both acted in good faith. Do you still believe that today? And do you think that the city...
I really have no idea. I've read in the paper. I've been away from government for a long time. So apparently the courts have ruled that they did not commit a crime, and that's the final word, and we just have to accept that.
But
it isn't a question of what anybody believes.
At the time, you did not believe that, and so I'm saying now, have you changed your stance on that?
I think there was an awful lot of evidence presented at that time that they were involved. There's been questions since then about the quality of that evidence, and so I've been away from it for so long. I just really can't respond because I just don't remember. But there's been plenty written about it, and I'd suggest you go and read some of that. Next question.
Right. Like, well, I mean, here's a guy they think it is so irrelevant that they didn't even need an answer for that. And, the simple answer is, clearly there was something wrong because 5 innocent people went to jail for a crime they did not commit. That's a slam dunk. Does that mean that the cops behaved criminally? Well, the courts have decided on that. You could say that. But to say that, do I think that something went wrong? Yes, of course it did. It's stunning. Really stunning. But that's Mike Bloomberg. It's going to be really fun when that dude decides whether or not he is going to run against Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren if they are the nominee. That's going to be really fun. Hey, speaking about poor journalism, this is just stunning. Ivanka Trump was on the CBS Face the Nation. And Margaret Brennan basically just let her say whatever she wanted without any... This is what is called a beat sweetener, ladies and gentlemen. This is where you show different people... Now, the trade-off in Margaret Sullivan's mind, and maybe it's Margaret Brennan's mind, rather, I should say, and maybe her producers or whatnot, is we're going to let Ivanka sail through this. And we will get an interview down the road that maybe we will be tough on. Right? That's the way that they justify this, without a doubt. Here's Margaret Brennan with the most sort of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Credulous interview style I think we've seen. Now, this didn't happen in 2020, so it's really maybe just the highlight of 2019. But if this was on day one of 2020, this would be the standard to beat in this year.
Whenever anyone hears you talk about the importance of being with your children, they also think about your personal, and you were vocal in your opposition to the family separation policy when it came to immigration and the U.S. border. You said that was a low point for you.
Correct.
We went and looked, and Homeland Security says there are still around 900 children who remain separated from their families. Is that something you continue to remain engaged on when it comes to immigration?
Well, immigration is not part of my portfolio, obviously. I think everyone should be engaged, and the full force of the U.S. government is committed to this effort to border security, to protecting the most vulnerable. That includes those being trafficked across our border, which this president has committed to countering and combating human trafficking in an incredibly comprehensive, aggressive way. So the full United States government has been focused on this issue, starting with the president.
There was no follow-up.
CBS just clipped that for their viewers.
Yeah.
So I'm glad the full force of the government's on this issue.
Yeah, the full force of the government is on this issue of the government kidnapping children. The full force. And as involved as I was then, I am involved today.
It's not my portfolio, but I'm going to be engaged.
I'm going to be engaged from a distance. Yep. There it is. It's good to know that she cares. It's good to know that she cares. Should we play this Pope thing? I don't want to play the Rudy Giuliani drunk. Who cares about that? What is the Pompeo? What is that one? Oh, okay. Yeah, this is good. I don't know why they brought Mike Pompeo on for this. There was another attack in New York. There's been a string now of attacks on Jews. One was a Hanukkah celebration at a rabbi's house. At least one killed, maybe a second. Here is Rachel Campos Duffy. It's the B team on Fox and Friends on the weekend. I think it is, right? Yeah. And Mike Pompeo talking about ostensibly these series of anti-Semitic attacks that we have seen because Donald Trump's so good for the Jews. Well, how do you deal with that if you're Fox and Friends? This is how.
Jerry, we've seen over Christmas, some horrific attacks on Christians. And by the way, the most persecuted religion on the planet right now, beheadings, a village attacked, and 7 killed there, as well as the kidnapping of a young teenage Christian girl. Why are we seeing this rise in attacks specifically for Christians?
But it's difficult to know precisely what the cause of these increases are.
I mean, we got to get the Christian attacks in there.
Yeah, some Fox News viewers are feeling left out in terms of the religious oppression.
Right. Unbelievable. That's weird. I wonder if other people there were just like, hey, isn't it a little weird? This is weird. Got to really make this point that non-Jews are getting attacked too.
The way that she says it, it's like they're at the top of the power rankings. Like, here's...
Jerry, we've seen over Christmas, some horrific attacks on Christians. And by the way, the most persecuted religion on the planet right now.
Christians are the most persecuted.
There's a lot of stuff going on with Muslims.
I don't know if she's heard about what's going on in China with the Uyghurs or what's going on in Kashmir. That seems to be a little bit oppressive. But Christians, do you understand that, first off, many times we can't say Merry Christmas? And that in other instances, you have people who are being chastised for commenting on someone's looks at work?
That's the tough thing, is that in the days right after Christmas, you can't go right back to the war on Christmas. You got to find the real things.
Secretary Pompeo, did you find that people started saying Happy New Year, almost on the 25th? It was just like, why couldn't you say Merry Christmas, or I hope you had a Merry Christmas, as opposed to Happy New Year going forward?
We don't appreciate things as much as we used to. We're all on our phones and, so he's moving on to the next thing.
Right.
Can't appreciate
it's always
anything.
what have you done for me lately, calendar? Hey. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Kowalski.
Kowalski in 2020. What's going on, Kowalski, from Nebraska?
Yes, I am eating my Soylent Green, contributing to that, feasting upon humans.
Nice.
So, wanted to call in with a little feel-good news. I was with a few buddies of mine from Iowa this New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and we discussed politics, as you do. And he's a medical student, so he knows a lot of the college crowd. He said pretty much as time has gone on, most Biden supporters, the majority of the Warren supporters, are all pretty much in the Sanders camp.
Wait, what happened?
So,
where's my sound machine? It's good to hear. That's good to hear.
yeah,
Iowa has
and
been.
apparently there's a massive there on Sanders, and somehow more Yang advertisements are getting through. I guess Buttigieg is like number one, and Biden is still number two on like just advertisement. But apparently amongst the college crowd there, Sanders is just unshakable support. So.
Well, we'll see what that turns into in terms of like, people showing up to caucus, because that's really the bottom line is the depth of support goes a long way in Iowa. And so we shall see. We shall see. But
Indeed we shall. But I did want to say something about that previous caller that you've had. I'm actually tending to my livestock now, so, this is personal. His use of Holocaust is actually pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
Like that touches on the Jews, the Armenians, in many contexts what's happening now. Like that is a horrible comparison. Not only that, we're not just wholesale slaughtering these creatures. We are raising them specifically for livestock. I mean, we're planning on eating them. If these animals did not exist, the area would be roaming with deer, moose, wolves, mountain lions, be roughly the same number of animals all slaughtering each other. So, the whole idea of a moral argument there is pretty bad. Not to mention the whole Holocaust thing is like, I don't know. I feel like that's the point in the argument where you start bringing up Hitler and you've lost. So,
well, I mean, I was trying to be, fair. I'm I'm sympathetic to that position on some level, and I think it is, the guy wants to use Holocaust because it is evocative of a very specific, attempt to sort of like ethnically cleanse of a specific type of people. Obviously, that's not the same dynamic. I mean, Holocaust, if you use it in sort of as generic term as possible, and you just talk about the killing of people as opposed to sort of like a systemic perspective on eliminating certain people from the planet, which of course is not what livestock farming is about. There is as much killing of life, but I mean, I just don't know where. I mean, and like I say, I can see where we would possibly evolve as a species to have a different source of protein. I know that people argue that we could have that now, and I think that's probably true on some level.
Just from my perspective as a farmer, I personally see in 10 to 15 years the proliferation of plant-based meats, whether that be lab-grown or, just simply plant-based alternatives. There's the economics are there, as I've explained before. That's happening no matter what anybody does. So, I mean, I think to try to grandstand and just make yourself feel better by saying, oh, this is just, a Holocaust is rather disingenuous. And I mean, people really do kind of miss the point on that. I don't know. It just seems like too many people have been removed from, rural life for so long. They may not exactly have a good understanding of how things run. As a farmer, I would prefer not to have factory farms. I mean, things were a little better before that. But, I mean, at the same time, livestock is also one of the most stable forms of our food supply. A drought rolls through, the animals aren't going to die, but if your crop production falls by 50%, people could starve to death. So, I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me. But I guess it's kind of the nature of my perspective. Most people don't have this perspective.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And I think that, like I say, I've lived in rural areas, and, the idea of we're raising a couple of pigs, and we're gonna love them until October, and then we're gonna eat them, is something you see on a regular basis. And it's true of I see it of goats, and I see it of sheep, and I see it of cattle, and then I see, I see a Fisher King rip the face off of a raccoon, or cats, go and eat a chipmunk, or I've seen them go after a rabbit. I mean, it's, it definitely adds a different perspective to it, but I appreciate the call, Kowalski.
All right. I hope you guys have a great 2020. And remember, everyone, get out there, vote. If there's still time, register. Know when your primaries are. Don't give up. We are this close to real change.
Yep. I agree. Now's the time. Crunch time, ladies and gentlemen. Crunch time.
See, Kowalski's the Republican that I would have on my ticket.
That's right. And I have a feeling that Joe Biden would not. Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. I do believe this is Jeff in Georgia. How are you today?
Jeff in Georgia. How are you, Jeff? What's going on? Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you and the whole crew there. Thank you so much for the great content you produced. Hey, I guess hypotheticals are in the air. We love good hypotheticals, Sam.
Sure.
Since you're in the mood today. Mine's very easy, though. This is something I was thinking about. There's only one candidate running for the Democratic nomination for president right now. I think Trump would possibly refuse to debate. His name is Bernie Sanders. I think if people really care about electability, I don't so much. But if you're into that kind of thing, it's kind of like playing a game of chess. If people like game metaphors, and one way to win chess is not to be good at chess and be good at reading your opponent. If you do something that freaks your opponent out real bad, then that's probably something good that you did. And Trump's a very easily manipulated guy. He can't really hide the way he feels. He's not capable of it. And he's terrified of debating Bernie Sanders, I think. I think if Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, I'd put money down right now that he's not going to win, or rather won't debate Bernie Sanders if that's the case.
I don't know, but I think that I think to the extent that he would avoid a debate, I think he would avoid one with Sanders first. I mean, look, his line of attack on Biden and Warren, for that matter, or Buttigieg, is, I think, clearer than it would be on Sanders. And I will say this, and it's consistent with what I was concerned about with Clinton in the late spring and in the summer of 2016, which is the only territory that Donald Trump can play on is personal character, which I think sounds probably counterintuitive to people because his personal character is so horrible. But it's the only territory he has the ability to comment on because he has the mind of a seventh grader. And so when he goes after Joe Biden, it's going to be like, remember, this is the guy who basically said to Marco Rubio, you have a small penis.
He's locked in on all the politics because of the nature of his coalition, right? Like he's committed to reactionary judges, and he can't offer anyone any broad-based economic prosperity because that is not in the cards.
But he doesn't have the ability to articulate it. That's the thing, is that he doesn't.
Oh no! Even if of course, but he will go out and say, I've booked the Christians love me, guys, and I've given him so many judges.
Yeah.
And you got your guns still. Like he will do that, or he'll have people do it for him.
But the thing is that when he gets on a policy territory, he will lose. Whether he goes there with all of them, but what he will do is he will attack Elizabeth Warren. He will say, like, look, you
and whether it's true or not, it happens not to be, but like you lied about being an Indian to get ahead, and I got everything I wanted to, by working for it. And Joe Biden, you were a corrupt politician. You were just like the rest of them. You're like Hillary Clinton. I used to leave, donations for you, and you would call me for donations and blah, blah, blah. And your son was corrupt and blah, blah, blah. None of those, just by the very nature of it, none of those line of attacks are going to go after, he's going to be able to go after Sanders. He's going to say, you're socialist. But then there's nothing he can follow that up with because he doesn't even know what that means. Like he doesn't have the ability to make a coherent critique about it. And that's the thing. He's like, it's basically like your Chicago politics. It doesn't mean anything to a vast majority of people. And he doesn't have the ability to sort of translate it because it's not like he is so steeped in policy that it's going to mean anything to anybody. And he can't go. I just don't think there's the same amount of room. Like he can't say, he can't attack Bernie Sanders where like, you're not sensitive to women's issues the way I am. Or when you look at the existing narratives that people use to attack Sanders, he's just not capable of using those because they're not even remotely credible. All he can do is smear, and Sanders does not run on any of his personal qualities. So you can't undercut them because they're already sort of baked into the cake on some level.
And I would say just like one more thing, and I appreciate you letting me hang on so long, Sam. Thank you. I really worry that I think Sanders is the best, strongest case scenario to beat him. But if he feels in the run-up to the election that he is more likely to lose than not, I worry about the levers of government that he's going to lean on. I worry about him getting us into a war is not out of the question. That would be an extreme example, but he could do that. But he could also do smaller or more medium-sized things. He could, really let ICE off the leash in some way. He could, have his Justice Department, do 180s on certain things. He could do any number of incredibly reactionary or even authoritarian things, specifically regarding the election itself.
Yep.
And in order to keep power, because he's afraid.
Yeah.
He's afraid of what's going to happen to him when he leaves. I am not optimistic about the near future, but this could be the year we turn it around. I'm really glad to hear Sanders did so well in fundraising and that you guys love him so much, because I sure as hell do too. We really need him to get the nomination for this and a whole lot of reasons.
All right, Jeff from Georgia. We'll see. It's going to be a crazy year. Appreciate the call.
Thank you so much, Sam. Yeah, I love you, Majority Report. You're the best.
Dissident Peasant, folks. Find it on your all of your podcast servers. So here's the thing that I find that I got a little bit annoyed about. I tried to stay off Twitter to some degree over the vacation. I was not horribly successful. For the most part, I'm trying to stay out of I'm not going to get into, too many primary wars. I am not a fan of Joe Biden's. And I've made no secret of that on Twitter. But what I also really, really I'm finding getting under my skin is, and I don't mind, I think there are legitimate critiques of Sanders. I think there's legitimate critiques of all the candidates. And, on balance, or I follows, I think Sanders is the strongest candidate and can bring about the greatest amount of change as president. But what but for the most part, I don't get caught up on stuff. Start with Norm Ornstein's thing. This is what was really, oh no, go backwards. You got to keep going back because here it is. This really drives me nuts because the thing I'm worried about more than anything, is Donald Trump winning re-election. That is the thing that I am worried. That is the worst case scenario. Joe Biden as president is not the worst case scenario to me. Pete Buttigieg, as much as I dislike the guy, not the worst case scenario. Amy Klobuchar, not the worst case scenario. I think long run, it's particularly those three, if they win, it's highly problematic. We're going to be dealing with, Tom Cotton in a different way, whatever. But the worst case scenario is Donald Trump being president January 21st, 2021. That's the worst case scenario. And just from a pure statistical assessment, Bernie Sanders has probably a 33 to 51% chance of being the nominee for the Democratic Party. He's one of three people who I think legitimately have a real chance. The idea that anybody can both hold the idea that Donald Trump is the greatest threat to the Republic, and I'm going to do something to undercut Bernie Sanders or, frankly, Biden or Warren or Buttigieg in the general election, to me, is a real problem. I have differences with Biden's policies. I'm also worried about his electability. Same with Buttigieg. Warren, I am more comfortable with than both those by a mile. But spreading lies to the effect of like, it's okay to undercut one of these people if they're the final nominee is a real problem. And this is what Norm Ornstein did. Now, Norm Ornstein, where does he work? At the AIE? I mean, he is ostensibly he's at the AIE, and he's a centrist. I mean, I think he votes Democrat, and he's a centrist. He used to be on Al Franken's show, and Al would be to the left of him. And at that time, Al wasn't even that was left, but he wasn't left. But here's what I just found bizarre. What's the date of this tweet? December 26th, 2019. He tweets out. Okay. So he tweets out. So it was not 10% of Bernie supporters who did not vote for Hillary. It was over 25%. And he tweets out a graphic from a story in 538 that says what Bernie Sanders primary voters did in November 2016. 75% voted for Hillary Clinton. 12% voted for Donald Trump. 3% voted for Gary Johnson. 4.5% voted for Jill Stein. 2.5% for other candidates or didn't recall. 1.6% voted, said they would have voted for Clinton, but they didn't vote. 1.9% didn't vote and said they would have voted for, or didn't say they would have voted for Clinton. All right. So he writes, it was over 25% of Bernie supporters who did not vote for Hillary. Now that's true. But in the same article, which was from February of 2019, this is almost a year-old article that he is putting out now, as if he discovered something. Because everybody knows that 12% of Bernie Sanders' primary voters voted for Donald Trump, as opposed to 24% of Clinton voters in 2008 voted for John McCain. 25%. Voted for John McCain. Not voted, not stayed home, not voted third party, voted for John McCain. But in that same article, he's clipping from, was this. You might be tempted to think that these, quote, never Hillary voters are leftists who thought Clinton was too much of a pro-corporate warmongering centrist. But relatively few of them were. Less than a fifth of them voted for Stein, for example. Instead, these voters were disproportionately likely to describe themselves as moderate or conservative. Among the 31% of self-described conservatives who voted for Sanders in the Democratic primaries, more than half were never Hillary voters, for example. A large minority of independents and Republicans who supported Sanders were never Hillary voters as well. So if anything, what this story should have really, if you're an honest broker, should tell you is that either Hillary Clinton was so hated that it inspired people to jump into the Democratic primary, which I'm sure is partially true. But the other partial truth is that Bernie Sanders has an ability to attract non-Democratic votes. Now, I don't think this is what Bernie Sanders' greatest strength is in terms of a general election. I happen to think he's attracting marginal voters who agree with leftist positions, broadly speaking, and get activated to vote. But the only interpretation of this number that you can make in this article is that this is a positive for Bernie Sanders. But Norm Ornstein is weaponizing this to basically say that not just that Bernie Sanders, you should vote for a different candidate, or that Bernie Sanders' policies are wrong or whatnot, but that there's something fundamentally against the primary directive that we all have, which is get rid of Donald Trump, that Bernie represents. That can easily be translated into the general election. In other words, stirring up those flames from 2016. Now there are people on the left who do this too. You know, Jimmy Dore is attacking Peter Dow for whatever reason. Like at this point, like can't take any value where it's coming from. You know, I interviewed Peter Dow. I thought it was an interesting interview. I don't know. I think he's sincere, but I don't care. I don't care if he has a facade for the remainder of the year, if it supports Bernie. Why wouldn't I take that? It's because for people like Jimmy Dore, politics is really about validation for themselves. It has nothing to do with policy objectives or end goals. And for politics for Norm Ornstein, being a centrist, being someone who is supposedly sort of just like I just call it as I see it, is really about protecting a set of issues that are maybe not as egalitarian, maybe a set of issues that maintain power where it is for the most part, because he's done quite well within that structure. But so my response was, and I quite enjoyed this because I don't generally go engage with people like this in terms of Twitter fights. But I wrote, this is sad. I don't like watching someone destroy their reputation as a balls and strikes guy. Now, I'll be honest. I don't know that that's his reputation, but I feel like that's the way he perceives his reputation, right? By blatantly misinterpreting numbers for false narratives, and to do so at the expense of democratic unity. And I put an exclamation point there because you know how important that is to me. Norm, everyone can read that 538 article and see what you're doing. Sad. And then Norm responded to that.
He maybe quote tweet? I don't know if it's, let me see. I have one here.
He brought it up somewhere.
I'm not able to find this.
Let me see if I can find it here somewhere in my mentions. But, I mean, basically, we went back and forth a little bit. And here it is. Bear with us, folks. Everybody's a little rusty after returning from vacation. And he goes, if you want to pretend that Nina Turner, Susan Sarandon, and David Sirota, among others, did not exist in 2016, go ahead. Now, remember, he's posting a poll. And now it's turning into, I don't like Nina Turner, Susan Sarandon, and David Sirota. If you want to ignore the Russian efforts to turn Sanders a voter from is at your right. Away from is your right. If you wanted to deny that there was a difference in swing states, all of which is not what I was arguing at all. I was arguing that what you're saying about Bernie Sanders voters is a clear misrepresentation. Period. End of story. And then I wrote back, if your argument is that Trump won those Midwest states because of tweets or proclamations from that actor, that state representative, and that journalist, then please show your work. Otherwise, I suggest that you stop confusing and or projecting your anger with analysis. Now, look, I've said many times, I don't know if those particular people certainly said that Susan Sarandon's perspective on this was dumb. And I certainly don't think it helped. But, and I think it contributed to Clinton's loss? Probably. Was it determinative? I said a million times that there's a dozen reasons why Clinton lost. Why it was that close, why she lost, Comey, just all the baggage she had, period. The way that she ran her campaign, her strategy of picking up 2 or 3 Republicans in the suburbs versus that one blue-collar guy in Pittsburgh. All of it. But it certainly wasn't something that was unique about Bernie Sanders voters that caused her to lose. And then I just tweeted at him below there. There was one more. He goes, make that journalist. In a quote, a concerted effort to drive votes from Clinton made no difference in states where she lost by a tiny margin. Sure, go ahead and believe that if it makes you feel better. But the concerted effort, if you want to say that you think that those 3 people or whomever helped to suppress the vote against Clinton in those states, then make that argument. Show your work and make the argument. But don't twist a graphic that comes from a piece that says these were not people who were going to vote for Hillary Clinton under any circumstance and try and twist it into that. I think it's creepy and it's decidedly unhelpful. You can't make these tweets with the premise that this is what brought us Donald Trump, and therefore what I'm going to do is increase the chances that we're going to get Donald Trump again. And consider yourself a responsible actor if that's really your goal. You can't do it. You can't. Because guess what? You're doing the same thing that you're accusing these people of doing. You're doing the exact same thing. So if it's that reprehensible that they did it, maybe you should stop it. That's all. That's my point there. And lastly, folks, all right, now we're not going to get to any more calls, but we'll be back tomorrow, folks. We're going to be here all year. All year. I'm going to hang up on the phone. Let's just play this last clip of the Pope. Folks, don't be grabby.
Don't be grabby. The Pope just wants to shake your hand. But if you yank on
He
him...
barely wants to do that, actually.
Well, yeah, of course, but he's got to do it. It's part of the job. He's going out. Was this for Mass or was this New Year's? When did this happen?
This was January 1st, it looks like.
Listen, when you see a celebrity...
Influencer.
Influencer. You want to shake their hand? Shake their hand. But they're not just there for you. You don't have any special words to give them. You know? Just be like, hey, appreciate your work. Something like that. Don't grab them. You know? They're people.
You're at their show. They know you're a fan.
Right. They know. Is he a deity? Does he count as a deity?
Yeah, he is the vessel to God in human
But he's
form
not a
right
deity.
now. No.
Because I was just going to say, like, they're people too.
He's the pontiff.
He's a person. He's a person. There he is, shaking hands. And this one woman, and, you know, she's obviously a big deal. She's very excited. But remember, I mean, this is an old guy. Oh, here it is. This woman right there. She grabs his hand. Whoa, yanks it. Can we tell what she's saying? But she, if you go back, actually, I saw a longer clip of this, and she, you know, she was like giving herself the cross beforehand. I don't know what she was telling him to do. There he is. There's the cross. She's excited to see him. And he's just shaking hands. He's just, you know, touching. And she grabs his hand and pulls his arm. She won't let go of him. And he gets very mad. So there it is, folks. So in 2020, all I'm saying is when you see your favorite top religious figure or celebrity, don't be too grabby.
I know Michael's not here, but he texted me to say if this were to happen at the live show, you could expect a similar response.
That's right.
Also, just want to...
Unless, of course, you've paid for his VIP section, and that's what you get to do, right, at the VIP section?
Yeah, that's for the meet and greet.
Right, for the meet and greet, for $75, you can pull them all around to allow that.
Yeah. But Mike Cole also tweeted out here, I think he's a writer, when you're angry that strangers try to control what you do with your body.
Yeah, there you go. Right, exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't want somebody to tell you what to do with your body and pull you in certain directions. That's actually probably the best take on that one. All right, couple IMs and we're out of here. Local pizza historian, only Bernie can beat Trump. Of the top four candidates, you have the man with the brain leaking out of his ears, the only human being pulling worse with black people than Trump, and the woman who's already been outsmarted by Trump before she entered the race and lets him freely use racial slurs. H-Dub, Mindy has gone Fernie, a full Bernie bro, and I'm here for it. Libertarian, Sam, are you okay with ant traps to Holocaust ant colonies? Then you are morally okay with using traps on humans that hold their families when they return home. Left coast, best coast. Using the time I spent listening to MR also to send texts for Bernie's, I've got severe social anxiety, and texting for Bernie isn't as intimidating as people like me might think. Give it a try. You won't believe the number of real conversations I've had with people's minds who have changed. That's awesome.
I haven't done it this time around, but in 2016, I remember phone banking for Bernie, and it was totally awesome.
Yeah, it's fun to do. Also, does this vegan guy think we'll get all other animals to become vegan once we all get humans? Like, this sounds like a bad philosophy class. Winnipeg Craig, I think it's important to note how enthusiastic Mindy was for Bernie. She was not that excited about him in previous calls. Maybe Mindy is a bellwether. Bitch ass road. Sam, when are you going to have me on? You're scared that I have the answer to those hoe-ass roads. We've reached out to that guy, right? You reached out to that guy. Yeah. He responded like that in a couple of months or something. David Montreal, my brother Mark received an MR subscription for his birthday. Can he get a shofar? Left is best. Yes, of course you can. Kerm Donut. If Bernie reverted to his 2010 position on immigration, he beat Trump by 5 to 7 points in the general. Arguably, although he may lose it on the Democratic side. Sam's Tinder profile. The Democratic Party was, I mean, look at what Obama did. in terms of immigration. Broadly speaking, the Democratic Party has moved. I mean, I'm talking the actual party, not the electeds. I'm talking the people have moved to left in terms of immigration. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right. New year, new Jew in your life. John from Houston. Best call of 2020. Eating humans does incredible things for your carbon footprint, by the way.
That's probably going to make it to the end of this year.
Cochlealism. As a vegan, let me apologize for all vegans because of that caller. Letter carrier. Sam, if humans commonly ate each other and grape crush soda didn't exist, would your views on social security solvency change? Yes or no? Liz Cheneyland. I would carve out an ethical exception to eat the animal Holocaust caller. Really cool. If everyone on Earth was Jeffrey Dahmer and your dad was Jeffrey Dahmer and your mom was Mrs. Jeffrey Dahmer, what would you have for supper tonight? DB, Sam, please let that animal rights caller get away with appropriating Holocaust. The analogy is incredibly problematic. Disco Stew, Sam, now that I've cornered you, will you finally admit that morally speaking, you think Holocausting libertarians is justified to prevent Greg from calling in? Colin from Nebraska, I nominate this for the best of 2020 clips. What if Matt had chocolate on his face and you had a fork and knife next to you? Ha, you immoral monster. Chadia Stevens, dear debate logic douchebags, have the rest of the internet to roam free. Please leave this space alone. Tomcat, hi guys, just a final addition to that one guy's call. I've always thought that Matt looks like a nice snack. Hey guys, after most of my country is on fire, this is not a drill. This is not normal. And after a year and a half of yelling to try and show people the federal budget has natural disasters refunding go down from a couple $100 million to 11 million to 2 million to 0. The breakthrough was TikTok. So now I have an account mainly for dunking on the Australian Prime Minister and demand the Uyghurs are released. Send us a link to it, Australian Angela. Matt from Mass. Hey, Sam, as a student of philosophy myself, I found that second caller extremely annoying. He kept saying you were dodging the question, but I don't think you were just having a different moral framework than the one he was trying to pin you on. There's actually a word for this. It's called moral pragmatism. Basically, it's a belief that morality is subjective and shaped by societal factors, and therefore an individual's morality is largely irrelevant. What matters is the morality imposed by the society in which you live. It's the systemic morality that matters. All right, fair enough. Welcome to 2020, folks. We've got the whole season ahead of us. Make sure you have the time. This is a congressional baseball fan. Welcome to 2020, folks. We got the whole season ahead of us. Make sure you take the time right now to rest a little, but we have to stay in shape for the spring. See you out on the field. And the final I am of the day. Champagne communist. Sam, why do you hate animals and love Republicans? LOL. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my